All right, 50. But as Crassius forbore from such jests in his speech against Scaevola and sported throughout that cause and discussion with that other species of humor in which there are no stings of sarcasm. So in that against Brutus, whom he hated and thought deserving of insult, he fought with both kinds of wit. How many severe things did he say about the baths which Brutus had lately sold? How many of on the loss of his paternal estate? And they were concise, as when Brutus, speaking of himself, said that he sweated without cause. No wonder that you sweat, said Crassius, for you are just turned out of the baths. There were innumerable things of this kind in the speech, but his continuous vein of pleasantry was not less amusing. For when Brutus had called up two readers and had given to one the speech of Crassius upon the colony of Narbonne, to the other that on the Servilian law to read, and had compared together the contradictory sections on public affairs contained in each, our friend very factitiously gave the three books of Brutus's father written on the civil law to three different persons to read. Out of the first book was read this sentence: "It happened by chance that we were on my estate at Privernum." On which clause Crassius made this observation: "Brutus, your father testifies that he left you an estate at Privernum." Again, out of the second book, my son Marcus and I were at my Albion villa, when Crassius remarked, "This wise man, who was justly ranked among the wisest in our city, had evidently some foreknowledge of this spendthrift's character, and was afraid that when he came to have nothing, it might be imagined that nothing was left him." Afterward, out of the third book, with which the author concluded his work, for that number of books, as I have heard Scaevola say, are the genuine compositions of Brutus, it chanced that my son Marcus and myself were sitting in my villa near Tibur, when Crassius exclaimed, "Where are those estates now, Brutus, that your father left you as recorded in his public commentaries? But if he had not seen you arrived at the age of puberty, he would have composed a fourth book and left it in writing that he talked with his son in his own baths." Who does not acknowledge now that Brutus was not less confuted by this humor, these comic jests, than by the tragic tone which the same orator adopted when, by accident, during the hearing of the same cause, the funeral procession of the old lady Juana passed by? Ye immortal gods, what force and energy was that with which he spoke! How unexpected, how sudden, when, casting his eyes that way, his whole gesture directed towards Brutus, with the utmost gravity and rapidity of expression, he exclaimed, "Brutus, why do you sit still? What would you have that old lady communicate to your father? What to all those whose statues you see carried by? What to your other ancestors? What to Lucius Brutus, who freed this people from legal tyranny? What shall she say to you are doing? What business, what glory, what virtue shall she say that you are pursuing, that you are engaged in increasing your patrimony? But that is no characteristic of nobility. Yet suppose it were, you have none left to increase. Your extravagance has squandered the whole of it. That you are studying the civil law, that was your father's pursuit. But she will relate that when you sold your house, you did not even among the movables reserve the chair from which your father answered his clients. That you are applying to your military art. You who have never seen a camp, or to eloquence, but no portion of eloquence dwells in you, in such power of voice and tongue as you have devoted to an infamous trade of a common informer. Dare you even behold the light, or look this assembly in the face? Dare you present yourself in the forum, in the city, in the public assembly of the citizens? Do you not fear even the dead corpse and those very images of your ancestors, you who have not only left yourself no room for the imitation of their virtues, but none in which you can place their statues? 51. This is in a tragic and sublime strain of language, but you all recollect instances without number of facetiousness and polite humor in one's speech, for never was there a more vehement dispute on any occasion or an oration of greater power delivered before the people than that of Cassius lately in his censorship in opposition to his colleague, nor one better seasoned with wit and humor. I agree with you, therefore, Antonius, in both points that jesting is often a great advantage in speaking, and that it cannot be taught by any rules of art. But I am astonished that you should attribute so much power to me in that way, and not assign to Cassius the palm of preeminence in this as in other departments of eloquence. I should have done so, said Antonius, if I had not sometimes envied Cassius a little in this respect, for to be ever so fastidious and witty is not of itself extraordinary subject of envy, but when you are the most graceful and polite of speakers, to be and to be thought at the same time the most grave and dignified of men, a distinction which has been granted to Cassius alone, seems to me almost unendurable. Cassius, having smiled at this, Antonius said, but Julius, while you denied that art had anything to do with fastidiousness, you brought to our notice something that seemed worthy of precept, for you said that regard ought to be paid to persons, times, and circumstances, that jesting might not detract from dignity, a rule which is particularly observed by Cassius, but this rule only directs that jokes should be suppressed when there is no fair occasion for them. What we deserve to know is how we may use them when there is occasion, as against an adversary, especially if his folly be open to attack, or against a foolish covetousness, trifling witness, if the audience seem disposed to listen patiently. Those sayings are more likely to be approved which we utter on provocation than those which we utter when we begin an attack. For the quickness of wit which is shown in answering is more remarkable, and to reply is thought allowable as being natural to the human temper, since it is presumed that we should have remained quiet if we had not been attacked, as in that very speech in which you alluded scarcely anything was said by our friend Cassius here, anything at least that was all humorous, which he did not utter in reply and on provocation. For there was so much gravity and authority in Dominitus that the objections which came from him seemed more likely to be enfeebled by jest than broken by arguments.